Viewers ask me all the time in the comments and by emailing me, Steve, what is one way that I can really catch numbers of fish? And this is an excellent way to do just that. Day in and day out, this lure gets the job done, and you don't see a ton of people throwing it. So no, this isn't about the Ned rig. This is about throwing a suspending jerkbait, rip bait, or slash bait. And I gotta tell you, this lure does not get the credit that it really deserves. Back-to-back casts. And I know these aren't huge fish, but that is what can happen. You can fish this thing winter, spring, summer, fall, any water conditions, you know, dirty water, clear water, stained water, doesn't matter the water temperature, and you're going to catch fish with it. And you know, the interesting thing is, out of all the trips that I took last year, I don't think I saw one other boat or one other angler from the shore throwing a suspending jerkbait. And you may ask, well, how do you know that? It's real easy to tell when somebody else is fishing one because of the ripping or the slashing action. And I catch fish on this thing all the time. Just yesterday I went out, we had a cold front, dropped about 20 degrees. Now there was some clouds and overcast because another front was following this one right up, and I fished for about 2 hours and caught just a ton of fish. Nothing huge, just a bunch of pounders, pound-and-a-half fish, but the bite was constant. Oh, there's one. There's one. There's one. And there was even lots of times where back-to-back, boom, 2 casts in a row, 2 fish in a row. And if you're wanting to get numbers, this is one way to do it. And not every day is, you know, pound-and-a-half, 2-pound fish. There's some days with this rip bait that you can go out and it's just 3-pounder after 3-pounder. And I'm telling you, that will quickly get buried in the memory banks as one of your best days ever. Well, one of the reasons not a lot of people throw it has a lot to do with what we talked about last week, and that was confidence. So I have 4 things that I want to go over today. There's a little better one that will make you a much better suspending jerkbait angler, and I think that you will really, really enjoy fishing this lure. Number 1 is to use a rod that is specifically designed for jerkbait fishing. And I know as bass anglers, we hear this all the time, but this is one situation where it's the length is what is most important. This jerkbait rod that I've got right here, and it's one of those new Lew's KVD models that I got last fall. It's 6'8", and I love it. It makes a huge difference, and it has to do with the rod tip and how close it is to the water, because this is a rod tip down type of presentation. If you're a little bit taller, I'm right at 5'10", I like to say 5'11", but my boys say 5'10", and a 6'8" is great for a jerkbait for me. If you're a little bit taller, they have a 6'10" model, and if you're even taller yet, a 7-foot rod is probably going to be just perfect for you. But that's the first one. Have a rod that is very much the right length, and not only is it going to be easier to fish, it's really going to save on the fatigue on your arm as well. Number 2 is to always, always, always make sure that you're ripping that jerkbait on a slack line. When you do this, you get that full 180-degree motion, and it is just enough to drive the bass absolutely crazy. If you go ahead and rip that bait on a taut line, it's going to more just pull straight forward and just have a slight sideways cut. Now, the one exception to this is in really cold water. There are times when I will just kind of more pull it. But if it's spring, summer, fall, yesterday the water was 55 degrees, it's slack line, rip, 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 and you get a ton of action from the lure. And once again, if you're pulling on a slack line, if you're ripping on a slack line, your arm's not going to get fatigued. If you start trying to rip all the time on a taut line, you will feel it really, really quickly. So that's kind of an indicator. Oh, yep, need to make sure it's a slack line. And number 3 is to have a variety of depth ranges covered in your jerkbait arsenal. I like to fish this lure when I'm pretty confident the bass are less than 15 feet. Man, there goes a nice bass right there, just cruising down the shoreline. So I've got some deep diving models, and then I've got some 300s and 200s that cover different depth ranges. Ideally, I want to bring this jerkbait just above where I think the bass are, or maybe just even with them. What I don't want is to be below where they are. So having multiple jerk baits to cover different depth ranges is really key and critical to getting the most out of this lure. Number 4 has to do with the hook set. When you're jerkbait fishing, the rod's just going to load up. And I think this is one thing that a lot of anglers that are new to jerkbait fishing is they're not real confident what the bite feels like. It's very, very seldom that you just feel that wham like you will on some other types of horizontal moving lures. You're going to rip that thing, pause, and most often the next time that you go to rip it is when you will feel some weight, and it takes a little bit to get used to. Now, as far as the hook set, just maintain that pressure. Once you feel the weight, just maintain the pressure. This is not a need for that powerful jig fishing type of a hook set. You'll just yank those trebles right away from that bass. So it's just going to load up, maintain pressure, and then just reel down on them. And once you kind of decipher what that bite feels like, it's just so much fun after that bait is on the pause to pull, and it's heavy. It's just a great, great bite. Man, I'm telling you, for numbers of bass, this jerkbait is so hard to beat. Now, one of the keys is making sure that you have that drag set properly. So if you'd like to watch a video on that, go ahead and check this one out right here. And don't forget to go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.